Welcome back to another LP Gallery tutorial. And today we're talking about creating weathered text. So we have four examples here. You can see we have four examples of weathered wood with the text on top. And if you look closely, it really looks like the text is fading away. So it looks quite realistic. So this is kind of done in a two-step process. The first part is to create the weathering effect on the text. That means it should look like it's chipped and flaking off, and it does. You can see right here in most of these, it really looks like it's flaking and chipping off the wood, which is what would happen if it's been on the wood for many, many years. And the second part is to create the fading part. So certain parts of the letter should start fading away and the background should start showing through. So again, the weather's taking its toll on the sign and it's all starting to fade away. So we have chipped, peeling paint, plus a lot of fading away of the text. And together, that combination gives you a nice feeling of very weathered text. Now, we can do this strictly with text itself. We can use text with symbols, as you see here. We can even use text with shapes, as you see here. Doesn't really matter. It's all done exactly the same way. Now, the important thing is when you find your piece of weathered wood is to make sure that you have spaces between the planks here. Because as you see here, the text is going over the wood here, and the spaces here are being cut out. So the spaces in the text are being cut out to match the wood. And that helps with the illusion of the text actually being painted on the wood. So again, if you can find a nice piece of weathered wood like this that has clearly defined spaces between the boards, it makes it a lot easier to cut that into the text and make it really look realistic. Now you can see, particularly when we get to the edges in all of these, okay, when we get to the edges, that's really where we sell that effect, because it really looks like it's chipped and peeling right at the edges. So that's important. So the edges are very important in this effect. So you need to find a nice piece of weathered wood that clearly has nice planks with spaces between them. Again, this is a two-step process, and it's a very simple process. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so I've got a nice image of weathered wood, and you can see I've got clearly defined spaces between the boards, and they're relatively straight, and that's important. Makes it a lot easier to cut the text through this if the lines are straight. Okay, now this looks pretty good. Now I'd like to warm the wood up a bit. The color is kind of cool. I'd like to make it a little bit warmer, so I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to go to my picture format, and I'm going to go to my color, and you can see we have the default here, and I can make it a little bit warmer by going to the right. So I can make it really warm. That's a little too warm. That's a little too warm. And I'll just maybe make it about here. So I've just warmed it up a bit. So it looks a little more natural. I think that looks a little closer to what real weathered wood would look like. So don't be afraid to either warm the wood or cool the wood just using your color effect. Now, just to keep things simple, I'm going to just use the word weathered. Now, you could, of course, use text with symbols. You could use text with shapes. It doesn't really matter. It all works the same way. If you want to use text with shapes, you would just draw the shape, select both of them, go to your merge shapes, and do a union. So they become one object. It's just that simple. Now, in this case, let's just keep it basic. So we're going to just use the word weathered. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is change the font. So I'm going to go to my home. In my font list, I'm going to use Berlin Sans. I like that. It's kind of a nice rounded font, so I'm going to use that one. It looks pretty good. And the next thing we have to do is turn it into a word art. So we go to Shape Format, Text Effect. We're going to go to Transform, and we'll go to Warp, and we'll just use the top one here. It looks pretty good. So basically, we have a word art object that's going to allow me to stretch this. So that's important. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to stretch it out. What I want to make sure is that it goes over the gaps here. So you can see that, the space between the boards, that's going to be important because we're going to be slicing the text right there. So we want to make sure that it covers all three of these. So it's going to look more realistic if we can do that. Okay, now next thing to do, of course, is to give it a color. So we'll go to text. And what I'm going to do is just give this nice dark red. And we want to make it transparent. So maybe I'll give it maybe anywhere between a 65 to 75% transparency. Let's take the middle. I'll take 70. Looks pretty good. Now, I don't want to use it the way it is like this. Now, the reason is I want to apply a paintbrush effect to it. That's one of the nice artistic effects. And paintbrush will not work on something that's a solid color. So this is just a solid color. So the paintbrush effect will not work on this. It needs a textured background. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this text, copy this wood pattern, and paste it into the text. Then the paintbrush will affect that because it has a textured background to work with. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it. So I want the textured text to be in the bottom. So this is the first one. So I'm going to click on this one and I'm going to go to my text options, go to my fill, picture, texture, you get the default. I'm going to say clipboard because we copied that. I want to tile it, and it's important to align it to the center. It's a lot easier to position it if you tile it and line it to the center. Okay, now I'm going to take this one here, the pink, put it on top like that, and we're going to select both of them and we're going to align them. So line center, line middle, that's perfect. Okay, now what I want to do is copy this. So while we got them both selected, I'm going to copy them and paste it as a picture. Now you need to have a picture in order to use the artistic effects. The artistic effects do not work on text. So they're still both selected. So I'm going to copy them and I'm going to paste them as a picture. Okay, so now we have this. It looks pretty good. As you see, we just have to look for key marks. So for example, I'm going to look at these knots here, and that's what allows me to line them up. Okay, the next step, of course, is to cut the spaces out here. Okay, so I'll just drop it down here, and I'm going to grab myself a nice rectangle and make sure it's long enough, longer than the text here. We definitely don't need the outline, so we're going to go to line, say no line, and we'll see how that fits. It looks about right. Now, if you need to make this thinner, all you have to do is go to your size right here, go to size, and right here you can see the height is 0.05. You just have to click on that and make it thinner. So if you need to be a little thinner, let's say you need to make it 3, you would type 3, hit the enter, it'd be thinner. But in this case, I think the 5 was okay, so I'm going to put it back to 5. Now all we have to do is duplicate it. So to duplicate the shape, all you got to do is hold the control and drag. So we duplicate. Okay, now I am going to be needing this again, so I'm going to duplicate one more, just put it off, because I'm going to be using it again. Okay, so now we can just sweep across this whole thing, grab everything. Okay, so we want to make sure you got the text shape and you got all the little rectangles here. So we're going to go to merge, we're going to do a subtract, it looks perfect. And now we line them up again. So in this case, I can see we got a knot pattern there, so it makes it really easy to line up. And we have something that looks like that. Now this doesn't quite look right, because if this was painted on the wood there, the paint would be much thicker, it'd be more blobby and thick, and you wouldn't see so much of the grain. This almost looks like it's tinted on the wood rather than painted on the wood. And this is where a nice little paintbrush effect comes in. So what I'm going to do is click on this. So what we're going to do is go to Artistic Effects, and we're going to use this one right here, this third one called Paintbrush. So I'm going to click on that. And now we get this pattern. See, we kind of get this modeled pattern here, and that works really, really quite well for what we want. You can see it almost looks like paint chipping and peeling, and you see we have thick parts and thin parts of the paint. It looks really, really good. And it took that from the grain pattern. Now you can see that the paintbrush has emphasized some of the pattern here. So you can see right here where we have this nice knotted pattern here, it's still blobby there, but you can still see the pattern. If you want to take the transparency down, so you want more of the background, you can do that, but I wouldn't take it down too much, maybe about 20%, and that's about it. Now what's really going to sell this effect is if we go to our picture format, we go to our corrections, and we're going to sharpen it. So right here, we're going to do real high sharpening on it, like this, and once we do that, we get these nice edges. You can see all along here, where we cut it, we get these nice sharp edges. So if you look at the paint now, it really looks like it's peeling paint. So take a close look, and we got edges on a lot of the paint here. So it really looks like it's chipped and it's peeling and it's flaking off. Okay, the next step is to create the faded part. So we want the text to look like it's fading into the background. So in real life, if this text was painted on wood and been exposed to the elements for years and years, either it would flake off in parts and expose the background, or it would just naturally fade away into the background. So we want to create that nice faded effect. Now to do that, we're going to go here. We're going to actually use this right here. Now what's going to create the faded effect is the soft edges effect. Now soft edges does not work on text. It works on shapes, it works on pictures, but not on text. So this is obviously text, so we have to copy it and paste it as a picture. So I'm going to copy it, paste it as a picture. Looks pretty good. I'm going to just take that, and we'll just move those up. Okay, so obviously I don't want these spaces here, these dark spaces. We got to get rid of them. That's why I kept this little rectangle. So I'm going to duplicate that, put one there, and put one there. Now I can sweep across and select everything like this. Just sweep across, go to my shape format, go to my merge shape, and do subtract. Okay, and we get that. So I'm going to quickly show you what we're trying to do. So I'm going to take this, line it up so the grain pattern is perfectly matched. We're going to go to soft edges, and I'm going to just do this, increase the soft edges. So you can see what happens. So what it actually looks like is that the background is fading into the text. But what it actually is just this text shape with the soft edges. Now soft edges works on all the edges, so it makes them transparent and keeps the center part here. Now the only problem is we can't control that, okay? So if we go even higher, you can see that, again, the thick parts are faded, but not the thin parts. It's very hard to control in one shot, both the thick areas and the thin areas. Now if we go the other way, like this, trying to get much thin areas as we can, then what happens is it doesn't look like painted solid text. It looks more like outline text. So that really doesn't work. So doing it in one shot is a fast way to do it, but it's very hard to control. And it also looks more like a pattern. So if we do something like that, you can see that it tends to look more like a pattern. It doesn't look very natural. Ideally, what we'd like to do is to fade every letter individually. So we need to cut each letter separately. Okay, so let's put this over here. And let me take this back. Now, because we have this nice soft edges, and the edges get really soft and fuzzy, what happens is when it blends into the background, you might be able to see some of the soft fuzzy part. That wouldn't be natural. So what I want to do before I actually start cutting this is I want to sharpen this. So what I'm going to do is go to my picture format, go to my corrections, and I'm going to put a nice sharpness, maybe this one here. So sharpness 25%. Okay. So we'll still get the blending to the background, but the middle part will be a little sharper and not so soft. Okay, so next step is to cut the letters out. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to do it with a merge effect called fragment. Now, if you've never used fragment before, let me show you how it works. I'm going to grab a circle, and I'm going to grab a star shape. And what I'll do is just make the star shape orange. How fragment works is this way. Any overlap becomes an individual object. So in other words, a star is overlapping a circle. So this part right here of the circle will be an individual object. So will this, and this. And anything over the circle will be an individual. So the star points here will be individual objects. So I'm going to select them. I'm going to go to my merge shape, go to fragment, and you can see that's exactly what happened. So these are all individual pieces. It works perfect. That's exactly what we want. So not only do we want to cut the letters out separately, but because we already had this split right here where we cut the spaces out, not only will it cut these letters out separately, but it'll make these all individual objects. And that's going to be important, especially when we do the thick letters here. So I can control each part of the letter individually, give it a more natural fading effect. Okay, so I'm going to grab a rectangle, and I'm not going to cut every letter out. I'm just going to do a couple of them. I'm going to take that, and maybe I'll do a T. Now it's very important that we try not to overlap like this, because it'll fragment that H that way. So we want to just get the individual letters as much as we can. Okay, and maybe I'll do another E like this, and maybe I'll just do the next one. Okay, so again, with luck, just by doing those, we might be able to fragment most of those. Okay, so I'm going to try to sweep. Now the problem is, if you sweep across like we did with the subtract, it doesn't quite work with fragment. So I just swept across to select everything, and I'm going to go to my merge shape, and I'm going to go to fragment. Now when I do that, this is what I get, blue rectangles. Okay, now that's not what I want. So unfortunately, you can't sweep across to select everything. What you have to do is select the bottom first. So we're taking that text shape, and then we click on the individual rectangles. Okay, and that's how you have to do it. Okay, so let's go to shape format, let's go to merge shape, and let's do fragment. Okay, now you see it brought the black spaces in. Don't worry about them because they're actually separate objects. So you can see that. So you don't have to worry about them. They made them separate things. It's just the way fragment works, so we don't have to worry about them. But the main point is that these are all separate objects. Now I can control these all individually. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to line up the grain and I'm going to do a soft edges on it and I can control it. Now I don't want all the soft edges always to be in the middle. That's just the way soft edges works. I can now slowly offset it. I'm still trying to keep the grain pattern there. I don't want to make it lopsided. So I'm still working with the grain pattern. Now because the soft edges has transparent edges, you can actually shift them left or right and you can still get the grain pattern working. So I think that looks a little more natural than right in the middle. Okay, now I'm going to take this one and this one has a knot pattern. So I'm not going to be able to move it very much because the knot pattern is pretty obvious. And we do soft edges and I think I'll just keep that kind of there. If I try to move the knot pattern, you can see the knot pattern is right there. So if it's got a strong knot pattern, you just got to leave it where it is. And I'll take this and do the same thing. And I might offset this, keeping to the pattern, kind of like that. I think that looks pretty good. So I want to make sure the grain pattern is still working through. Okay, and I'll take the last one here and we'll put it here. And we'll make that a little soft edges. And I might want to shift this if I can. Still match the grain pattern, something like that. Okay, so you can see that looks a little more natural than the way it was before. So we got individual control on different parts of the letters. Okay, the next thing is to check out and see how the letters actually separated. So I'm going to click here and you can see these two are still kind of combined. That's not a problem. We can separate them. And I'm going to look at the rest of them. And the rest look pretty good. It looks like they separated quite nicely. Okay, again, don't worry about these black lines. They're actually separate objects. Okay, so these two are still kind of stuck together, so we have to separate them. To do that, we're going to grab a rectangle, and again, just go over here, and now I'm going to click on this, and that takes both of them. Hold my shift, click here, 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 click on the rectangle, and go to shape format, merge, and fragment. Okay, so again, fragment gave us this kind of funny thing. Doesn't matter, we don't need it. But now the E and the A is separated. So if that happens, you just got to create a rectangle and separate them again. Okay, so in this one here, I'm going to do the second letter. You want to match the grain pattern, and let's do the soft edges. And I'm going to kind of move that a bit. I don't want them all in the middle, kind of like that. I'm going to take that one, put it over there, and do the same thing, soft edges. And maybe I'll just leave that one there, and do this one, match the grain pattern, and do soft edges. And maybe I'll just move that off a bit, still trying to match the grain pattern, make sure the grain pattern is flowing through. And then take this one, put it here, and again, do this. And maybe I'll offset that a bit. And we get something that looks like that. Okay, now we don't want to make this too strong. We don't make the soft edges too strong, because if it's too strong, then sometimes you can't really read the letters. So I might want to soften it a little bit more, because I still want to be able to read the letters. Okay, I think you know what I'm going to be doing, and as I've shown you, all of these have been separated. So what I'm going to do is just speed this up and get this done quickly. That looks pretty good. Now the last thing to do is just take a look at them. Maybe you want to make some a little stronger, a little less, and just go through them. Now you don't want the effect to be really strong where the background really shows through, because then it makes the letters a little too hard to read. So you want some fading, but not lots of fading. So you still want to be able to read the letters. Now the one downside to do them as individual pieces like we did here is if you decide to change the color of the wood. So if I were to go here and go to picture format and go to color, and let's say make it really bright wood like that, well now all these little pieces don't match. And unfortunately you can't just select them all like this. It doesn't work. And go to color, you'll see you're not getting the color tone in there. All you get is a recolor. So you'd actually have to go and do each one, change the color individually. So keep that in mind, that there's no way to select them all in one shot. Now, if you're doing a recolor, that's different. Recolor can be applied to multiple objects, but not a color tone or color saturation. It only works on individual objects. So the next thing I want to do is maybe recolor the text itself. Now the problem is it's going to be kind of hard to select the text shape here because we have all these little pieces on top and it's really hard to kind of select it. So what I'm going to do is just probably move one of these off a bit. Then I can select the text shape. So now I've got that. So I can go to my picture effect right here and we're going to do color tone. So color tone will make it warm or cool. If I go to the left, it gets cooler. If I go to the right, it gets warmer. So if I go to the left, I can switch it to like purple and you can see it looks pretty good. Now we go to blue, that gets to be a little too bright. So that doesn't quite work out. So we go the other way, we get more to the red. Okay, so you have that ability to still alter the color. Let's say I want to go to purple. And then I can take the saturation. If I go this way, it becomes more saturated, go this way, it goes towards the gray. So you can do something like that. And it still looks pretty good. Okay, now, as long as you start out with a color, you can use the color tone and saturation to change the color. Now, if we go here to color and we decide to recolor, then what we're doing is basically making it one color. So the color tone will not go from like cool to dark. So if I were to go here, and let's say make it green, and then do temperature, you can see it's still going to stick to green. Just makes it a little lighter or darker green. And the same with the saturation. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you recolor, then you're not going to go from the warm to cool colors. You're going to stick to that one color. That still looks pretty good. And of course, you can go to your corrections and you can make it darker or lighter, whatever you like, and still play with these effects. Okay. That looks pretty good too. So we have dark green faded in the background, light green here, kind of flaking off. And again, the background is showing through. So anyways, that is how you create weathered text on a piece of weathered wood background. So I hope you enjoyed this. It wasn't difficult to do at all. It was just a little bit time consuming doing these individual pieces, but they weren't difficult. They just took a little more time and it's a repeated thing. You repeat over and over and over again. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, give it a like. If you'd like to subscribe, we always have interesting things to do with PowerPoint. So again, thank you for watching and we hope to catch you on the next video.